This is the story of Min Kyung-kong, an accomplished senior manager who was demoted to be the secretary of Lee Seob, the spoiled heir of the TK Group. Surprisingly, the very guy Min Kyung had outshined so many years ago during new employee training. Will Lee Seob seek revenge for his ego, by intimidating her, scaring her, and even kissing her? Wait, what? How did they end up like this? Let's start from the beginning. But before that, make sure to subscribe, as we've got plenty of interesting content to watch. The story begins at the female lead's house, Min Kyung, as she gets dressed for the occasion. Her mother tells her the dress is worth every penny and her brother comments that she looks very mature. But instead of admiring the dress, Min Kyung is busy calculating how many times she should wear it to justify the hefty price tag. Then, her mother tells her that work is different from school, so she suggests following her superior's orders without arguing or complaining. Last but not least, she should smile, no matter what. Then, we're quickly taken to a scene 10 years later. Min Kyung had followed her mother's advice. She always obeyed her superiors and never argued with them. She always smiled, no matter the situation. As a result of her sharp wit, she received numerous awards for being the best at everything. It seemed like she'd have a bright future, right? But no. Suddenly, she's appointed as an executive assistant. She's furious. After 10 years of working like a dog to reach the senior manager position, she's demoted to a mere secretary. She asks her boss if it's because she made a mistake and offers to fix it, but her boss responds with a no. He says she's brilliant, and there's nothing he can do about this very unexpected move. This is a decision made by Jun Seob, the CEO of TK Group. Then, her boss tells her she'll get a good offer for this position. Upon hearing that, she feels like this could be the best opportunity for her or the biggest crisis of her life. Then, we're shown a handsome guy at the airport, who turns out to be Lee Seob, the executive director our female lead will be working for. Manager Kim from TK Group picks him up, saying it must have been a stressful business trip. But our lead reveals that he lied about taking a business trip. It's just an excuse to enjoy a vacation after years of hard work. He's worked diligently for 34 years hoping to become CEO of the company. But one day, Jun Seob appeared out of nowhere and took over the business. So he resigned, left a message, and went on a fake business trip. Lee Seob asked the manager to take him to his apartment, but the manager replies he was told to take him directly to the strategic office. With no other choice, he pretends to be exhausted and insists on being sent home. At that moment, he gets a call from Jun Seob and declines it. But the phone rings with another call, this time from senior manager Kang Min Kyung. He tries to ask Kim for more details before answering Min Kyung. The manager hands the phone to Lee Seob and he's confused as to why she would call him. His confusion is quickly cleared up when she informs him she'll be his personal secretary and executive assistant from now on. He's completely shocked that a talented senior manager like her will be his secretary. Lee Seob starts scolding her, saying she's not his secretary and to stop joking. Lee Seob hangs up the phone without speaking to Jun Seob. On the other end of the call, Jun Seob tells Min Kyung to proceed with the schedule anyway. Then we see our handsome lead sleeping, but suddenly gets a call from the manager. The manager and Min Kyung are outside waiting for him and ask if they can come in. He yells at the manager saying he doesn't need a secretary, and questions Min Kyung on why she's outside his home. She tells him she's just following an order from CEO Jun Seob, then says she's coming in since they don't have much time. He yells at her to wait, but stumbles and falls just as she enters the room. At first, she greets him with a big smile saying, "Good morning," until she realizes he's only wearing his boxers. It was an awkward moment. Lee Seob's face turns red, but Min Kyung is professional and simply shuts the door. Lee Seob screams in embarrassment. After a while, Lee Seob comes out properly dressed and Min Kyung tells him they only have 15 minutes and asks if that's enough time for him. Lee Seob says he hasn't even showered, hasn't eaten, and has nothing to wear. But being the best worker in the company, Min Kyung is fully prepared and has brought him clothes and breakfast. He asks if just because she's his secretary she's allowed to enter his house like that. He argues that it's his private space where he does whatever he wants, like walking around naked. He asks if she'll be able to handle that defiantly. She's smart, and instead asks him if he feels uncomfortable because she's a woman. He laughs at her saying if she's being serious and questions why he would feel uncomfortable. She's unfazed by his teasing, saying it's a relief that he feels comfortable with her. Before Lee Seob can say anything, Min-kyung reminds him they only have 10 minutes left. Doing the math, he realizes there's no time for a shower and tries to hand him a towel for the bath. This freaks Seob out, and he yells at them to get the towel out of his sight. In the end, Lee Seob gives in and says to wait 5 minutes while he showers. Lee Seob remembers the first time he saw Min-kyung 10 years ago and comments that she hasn't changed at all. He remembers when he got second place for the first time in his life after she snatched first place as best employee. That's when he started hating her. The flashback ends and we return to the present where Lee Seob is drying his hair. Seeing Min-kyung, he confirms with her that they have 5 minutes left. She praises him for doing a good job, which leaves him speechless. She then informs him that she's not a fan of clingy secretaries and says she doesn't like him. He's doing this to try to scare her, but she simply reminds him that they're now behind schedule. Lee Seob is shocked by her lack of reaction. Then, from Min-kyung's point of view, we find out she also doesn't like Lee Seob. She thinks he's childish and spoiled. However, while watching him in the car, she admits to herself that in terms of looks, Lee Seob is totally her type and smiles awkwardly. In a flashback from a week ago, we see the CEO of TK Group, Tae Si-wob, speaking with Min-kyung. He first praises her for being an efficient worker and then tells Min-kyung to take good care of Lee Seob. It's obvious the CEO cares a lot about Lee Seob. When Min-kyung starts doubting her abilities, the CEO mentions the talents of Min-kyung's younger brothers as winter sports athletes. The CEO hints that TK Group would support Min-kyung's brother's sports careers if she accepts the job. In the next scene, we see Min-kyung leaving the CEO's residence while mumbling about how intimidating the man was. In her mind, the CEO was like a giant tiger. At that moment, she gets a call from her younger siblings, Manhwa and Min-kyung, with good news. They're now TK Group-sponsored athletes. The whole family is celebrating this joyful moment. Min-kyung thinks to herself that it's all worth it as long as her younger siblings are happy. We return to the present where Min-kyung shares a car ride with Lee Seob. Min-kyung reminds herself that she shouldn't have romantic thoughts about Lee Seob because she has to work hard for her family's happiness. The car takes them to the CEO's residence. The CEO is Lee Seob's grandfather, and Seob happily fulfills his duties as a grandson. He brings snacks to the CEO, and even gives him shoulder massages. Min-kyung thinks to herself that the CEO was very different around Seob compared to when he had spoken to her. But as soon as he turns to Min-kyung to ask if she's doing her job well, his face turns scary again. Min-kyung hides her fears and responds that it was only her first day and that she'll continue improving in the future, with a big smile. Despite her smile, Lee Seob notices her hands shaking and realizes she's acting differently compared to when she was in his apartment. The CEO reminds Min-kyung of his high expectations, and Min-kyung assures him that she'll do her best to meet them. Lee Seob concludes that Min-kyung is afraid. The CEO asks Lee Seob to visit his residence often, both to chat and to take care of business matters. He then calls on Min-kyung to make sure she understood that her job is to take Lee Seob. Min-kyung nervously sweats as she confirms she understood. He has assigned the most talented employee in the company, Min-kyung, as Lee Seob's secretary. Lee Seob agrees with his grandfather that Min-kyung is unique, but tries to oppose this arrangement. Before he can say anything, Min-kyung panics and tries to stop him by tugging on his clothes and grabbing his arm. She's worried about losing her job if Lee Seob complains in any way. In the end, Lee Seob didn't express any dissatisfaction. Instead, he thanked his grandfather for assigning Min-kyung as his secretary. In the next scene, we see Min-kyung arriving home. She complains about being tired and wanting to shower and rest. Unfortunately, upon opening the door, she sees her two younger brothers, who are very happy to see her. Min-kyung's roommate, a cute girl named Sia, welcomes her home and says they've prepared a surprise party to celebrate the twins' sponsorship. Compared to how energetic the other three were, Min-kyung felt like a stranger with how exhausted she was. After Min-kyung showers, she finds out her older brother, Hyun-sung, will also come to the party. He just returned to Korea after a long time abroad. Min-kyung is happy to see the handsome guy again. Hyun-sung is also glad to see Min-kyung and says she's still the same as ever, affectionately patting her head. For a moment, Min-kyung feels shy, but quickly hides it by talking about his funny t-shirt with a drawing of an onion, which is Min-kyung's favorite cartoon character. We learn that Min-kyung and her siblings treat Sia and Hyun-sung like siblings, since they grew up in the same town. Min-kyung didn't have other friends her age, as she entered the top university in the country at the young age of 17. Sia and her brother Hyun Song were a big part of Minkyung's youth. Hyun Song was a senior student at her school and was a huge help to Minkyung during her school days, so much so that she sees him as an older brother. The party begins and everyone's drinking beer, except for Minkyung because she can't handle alcohol. Besides the twin sponsorship, they're also celebrating because Hyun Song got a new job at the law firm MIP. Due to his job, he'll be settling in Korea. Hyun Song reveals he'll be working with the TK group and asks Minkyung what department she's in. Sia is the one who says Minkyung works as a secretary, then pretends to interview Minkyung about her thoughts on working with Lee Seob. Minkyung's mood immediately drops upon hearing Lee Seob's name. Undeterred, Sia keeps playing reporter and shares info about Lee Seob with the group. According to Sia, Lee Seob should be the successor of the TK group, but his beautiful, doll-like looks drew everyone's attention. His privacy was often invaded by the media when he was young, so once he became an adult, he completely disappeared from public life. Sia is more excited about Minkyung's job than Minkyung herself is. Minkyung is worried about being fired because she doesn't like Lee Seob. Everyone is shocked when they hear Minkyung say that and can't believe what they're hearing. Minkyung tells the story between her and Lee Seob that caused them to not get along. However, she knows that despite her feelings, they have no choice but to work together. Hyun Song sympathizes with Minkyung's situation and shows his support, but Minkyung tries to downplay her stress by talking about the incentives she receives. Hyun Song reminds her that her health is more important than the money she earns. Convinced by Hyun Song's kind words, Minkyung promises not to overwork herself. But the good times don't last long. Just as Minkyung relaxes, her phone rings with new messages from Lee Seob. He asks her to organize a bunch of documents for his meeting tomorrow. Although Minkyung despises Lee Seob, she still greets him with a bright smile in the morning. However, Lee Seob doesn't return the favor and simply points out that Minkyung was late. It turns out Lee Seob was the one who made Minkyung late, since he changed his door code, preventing her from entering his apartment. Yet he pretends not to know and blames Minkyung for disrupting his schedule. When Minkyung tries to get Lee Seob to start his workday, Lee Seob brushes her off saying he's tired. Even when Minkyung offers him a cup of coffee, he arrogantly refuses it and tells her to throw it away. As Lee Seob keeps being difficult, Minkyung does her best to stay patient. However, she knows she's quickly reaching her limit. Thankfully, she manages to get Lee Seob to his office in the end. As they review the day's meetings, they arrive at the segment about TK Fashion. Lee Seob complains that it's impossible to fix TK Fashion's per performance in a short time. He's deeply upset because, despite working hard for years, Jun Seob took all the profitable businesses and left him with the scraps. This makes him reluctant to work to the point of considering quitting. Minkyung immediately gets worried, since this heavily affects her job. She wonders what happened to the young Lee Seob who was passionate about his work. Lee Seob teases her about her obvious disappointment, but Minkyung tries her best to stay professional and says she's happy to work for Lee Seob. Obviously, Lee Seob sees through her lies. To her face, he calls her a bad liar and warns her never to do it again. Lee Seob just wanted to intimidate Minkyung, but what he didn't know is that his gestures made Minkyung's heart race. In the afternoon, Lee Seob dreams about what happened 10 years ago during new employee training, when Minkyung became the best new employee. Back then, the company's CEO, his grandfather, had told him to observe her and figure out if Minkyung was someone trustworthy. But Lee Seob wasn't willing to do it. He didn't even want to think about her. Since Lee Seob was a very handsome man from a wealthy family, he always had women falling all over him. Even during the training period, Lee Seob caught the attention of his new female co-workers. They'd get shy and run away when he smiled at them. But the truth is, Lee Seob didn't like how much attention he got from women. He thought it was annoying to have to pretend to be nice to keep up his image as the company's heir. To him, Minkyung was different. Minkyung didn't act shy around him and didn't avoid his gaze. Strangely, Lee Seob felt uncomfortable with Minkyung's reaction. When Lee Seob wakes up from the dream, he's confused about why he dreamed about the past. But before he can reflect on it, Minkyung walks in with a bunch of documents that need Lee Seob's approval. Lee Seob is about to complain about the documents when he realizes all the information is easy to read thanks to Minkyung's data organization. Instead of feeling grateful, Lee Seob tells Minkyung she doesn't need to work so hard. No one cares whether Lee Seob does any work for the company or not. Min-kyung denies this and assures Lee Seob that he's essential to the company. She also tells him it's an honor to be able to help him with his work now. For a moment, Lee Seob seems to feel touched. But he quickly changes the subject and tells Min-kyung to leave. Later that day, when Lee Seob meets his brother, Jun Seob is surprised that Lee Seob came to work. He praises Lee Seob for doing a great job, but Lee Seob tells his brother that it was Min-kyung who did all the work. Lee Seob asks Jun Seob how he managed to get Min-kyung to work as a simple assistant for him. He suspects that Jun Seob had used some terrible threat to force Min-kyung to accept the company's decision. Jun Seob simply laughs and mentions the company's public relations manager, Yoo In-mok. Immediately, Lee Seob understands that the company has used the figure skating careers of Min-kyung's twin brothers to threaten her. Lee Seob doesn't like this. But Jun Seob simply says that they hired Min-kyung because Lee Seob went on vacation and caused a lot of work to pile up. Jun Seob justifies the company's decision, saying that Min-kyung's outstanding skill at her job was needed to compensate for Lee Seob's absence. Lee Seob knows that Min-kyung's family is not wealthy. Her parents have a noodle restaurant that could not support their children's sports careers. Min-kyung could not refuse the company's offer if she wanted her brothers to be happy. Lee Seob doesn't like this. But Jun Seob doesn't care about Lee Seob's feelings. Instead, he asks Lee Seob if he dislikes her because of her humble family background. Lee Seob doesn't answer, but in his heart he realizes the true reason why Min-kyung works so hard. This realization makes him feel uncomfortable. After a few days, instead of hating Min-kyung, Lee Seob begins to fear her. This is because she always appears out of nowhere to make him work. Even when he thought he could have a cup of coffee and relax, she would come and talk about work with him. The sound of her high heels approaching, and the way she bursts into his office, frightens him. He complains about this while sitting in his car and making Manager Kim drive him aimlessly. It was the only way Lee Seob could relax alone. However, Min-kyung calls Manager Kim in the middle of Lee Seob's venting, and Manager Kim answers the call before Lee Seob manages to stop him. He quickly whispers to Manager Kim to say he is not there. Min-kyung hears this and maliciously comments that Lee Seob had no plans outside the office. This scares Lee Seob, and he tries to lie about being busy. But Min-kyung is a professional and politely tells him she will be waiting for him with piles of work. Back home, Min-kyung complains about Lee Seob's unserious attitude to Sia, while Sia comforts her. Hyun-sung joins them for dinner, as Min-kyung's mother had sent side dishes during the day. During dinner, Hyun-sung mentions that Sia was going to have a blind date the next day. Sia is surprised that he knew. Hyun-sung explains that he knew the man Sia was going to meet because they went to the same elementary school. Sia awkwardly asks what Hyun-sung said to that man. Hyun-sung says he told him that Sia is pretty and elegant. Unknowingly, Min-kyung is sweating nervously. Feeling her friend's mood, Sia quickly makes Hyun-sung leave. Then it is revealed that Min-kyung and Sia had a secret plan. Sia didn't want to go on a blind date because she wanted to attend a concert of her favorite idol group. So, she pitifully begged Min-kyung to help her. Min-kyung agreed to go on the blind date pretending to be Sia. But after hearing Hyun-sung's words, Min-kyung was worried she wasn't as pretty and elegant as Sia. However, Sia took this as an opportunity to play dress-up with Min-kyung. She was very excited to give Min-kyung a makeover that would make her look even better. On the day of the blind date, Sia is excited about her concert. Meanwhile, Min-kyung doubts about her dinner despite Sia's enthusiasm for her transformation. First, Sia applies the most magical and beautiful makeup on Min-kyung. It was so magical that even Min-kyung was surprised to see herself in the mirror. But Sia is not finished. Next, Sia dresses Min-kyung with an outfit she had prepared. Then we see Lee Seob arriving at a hotel for a meeting with his friends. He passes by a woman wearing a blue jacket and skirt while looking for the lounge bar. The woman is Min-kyung, but she doesn't notice Lee Seob either. During dinner, Min-kyung's blind date, Jang-woo, compliments her appearance while feeling puzzled. Let's take a moment to appreciate Sia's incredible transformation. Wow! But all Min-kyung could think was that she only had to stay 1 hour. Jang-woo invites Min-kyung to the lounge bar to enjoy the famous cocktail while watching the city lights. Min-kyung politely declines. Once the date ends, Min-kyung takes off the contact lenses she was wearing, as they dried her eyes. Then, Min-kyung decides to make the most of her night enjoying the free cocktail that came with the one-night stay Sia gave her. On the other hand, Lee Seob's friends ask him about his relationship status. They laugh at him for being single. One of his friends mentions that Lee Seob had a possible future marriage partner who was the daughter of a professor. Then they take out champagne to toast Lee Seob's love life. Lee Seob grunts to himself, saying that his friends are more excited than him about his love life. Suddenly, he hears a familiar sound of high heels. His fear instinct is quickly replaced by admiration as he looks up. He can't help but be dazzled by the beauty of the woman before his eyes. Lee Seob watches her for a long time, completely captivated. Based on the sound of the footsteps, Lee Seob thought it was Minkyung, but he quickly dismisses that thought because he reasons it was impossible for Minkyung to visit a place like that. Then he sends a text to Minkyung to remind her about the next day's schedule. To his surprise, the beautiful woman's phone rings with a notification. After the girl pulls out her phone, Lee Seob is surprised. He even recognizes the phone grip. A few days ago, he had been complaining about how pathetic he was to Manager Kim. Shortly after the beautiful woman uses her phone, Lee Seob receives a reply. This surprises him even more. He can't believe it is Minkyung. One of his friends notices him staring and they all begin to tease him for having a crush. On the other side, Minkyung orders the cocktail Jong-woo mentioned earlier. It was a good cocktail, and she enjoys her drink in the beautiful lounge atmosphere. The night view of the city and her beautiful makeover put Minkyung in a good mood. Just then, Jong-woo appears. Minkyung panics since her alcohol tolerance is only 1 glass. Lee Seob watches as Jong-woo chats with Minkyung and even takes a seat at her table. Jong-woo orders 3 more drinks unaware that Minkyung feels stressed. It turns out he only ordered them because he knows Sia likes cocktails. Minkyung decides to finish the drinks as quickly as possible before excusing herself. But in a twist, Hyunseong calls Jong-woo and tells him he is going to pick up Sia and take her home. Upon hearing this, Minkyung panics even more because the plan would be ruined if Hyunseong finds out the truth. Minkyung tries to excuse herself, but she has drunk too much and her vision becomes blurry. Jong-woo tries to help her and tells her to sit down, but Minkyung insists on leaving. This makes Lee Seob misunderstand the situation and intervene, scolding Jong-woo for bothering Minkyung. Minkyung hears the familiar voice, but due to intoxication, she can't remember who it should be. Lee Seob keeps scolding Jong-woo unaware that Minkyung's condition worsens. Minkyung tries to move away, but stumbles into Lee Seob's chest. Lee Seob catches her to prevent her from falling, but then... Before continuing, just a small favor, if you're enjoying the video, make sure to subscribe and like it. Minkyung's eyes, slightly glassy from intoxication, lift to meet the familiar face before her. Lee Seob, looking down at Minkyung, accidentally catches a glimpse of her partially exposed skin and quickly turns away, blushing. Taking off his coat, Lee Seob places it over Minkyung. Minkyung looks at him tentatively, wondering if he had come specifically to ask for work materials and mentioned he would go get them. Lee Seob looks surprised by her reaction. He thinks she must be crazy and totally confused about what is happening now. Minkyung keeps murmuring about documents and files. Lee Seob angrily asks Jong-woo how many cocktails he made Minkyung drink. Jong-woo, visibly nervous, insists he did nothing. Pulling out his business card, Jong-woo continues explaining that he and Minkyung were on a date, assuring he was not the shameless man Lee Seob imagined. Jong-woo even turns around to question Lee Seob's interruption of his date, and asks who he is. Hearing this, Lee Seob clenches the business card and says haughtily to Jong-woo that he is Minkyung's colleague. Jong-woo expresses doubts, but Lee Seob affirms it definitely. Hearing their exchange, the confused Minkyung tries to explain Lee Seob's identity. Accidentally, Lee Seob's coat falls to the floor. Lee Seob murmurs it was nothing and bends down to pick it up, but Minkyung instinctively also bends down to help. Lee Seob, looking up, sees again Minkyung's cleavage, with his mouth open in shock and his face flushed. Quickly, Lee Seob wraps the coat around Minkyung again, urging her to sober up since people are watching them. Lee Seob is surprised to see how much she had drunk and wonders if Minkyung doesn't know the world is full of bad people. Jong-woo, still puzzled, presses Lee Seob about his identity. Before Lee Seob can answer, Hyun-sung appears. Jong-woo asks him because Lee Seob says his date is not Seob but her best friend. Lee Seob, supporting the drunk Minkyung, looks at the stranger with curiosity. After explaining to Jong-woo, Hyun-sung bows to Lee Seob with respect. He introduces himself as the legal advisor of the TK group. Looking at the man in front of her, Minkyung does not recognize who he is for a moment, but once she realizes, her pre-drinking memories become clear again. She is surprised, fearful that Hyun Sung might discover the truth. What she didn't know was that Hyun Sung already knew everything. Worried and scared, Min-kyung tightly squeezes Lee Seob's hand, hiding behind him. Lee Seob looks surprised, but does not withdraw his hand either. Internally, he wonders if he is getting nervous again like that time. Hyun Sung, smiling, tells Lee Seob that Min-kyung must be very drunk and that he has come to take her home. With his hands behind his back protecting Min-kyung, Lee Seob coldly informs Hyun Sung that he won't let her go with a stranger, and questions their relationship. Hyun Sung explains their close bond as childhood friends and assures Lee Seob there is no need to worry. While explaining, Hyun Sung signals Min-kyung to come closer. He assures her that he won't tell Seob about today. Then he asks Min-kyung how many drinks she has had tonight. Still dizzy, Min-kyung answers confusedly that she has had 3 drinks, plus a little champagne. She asks if Hyun Sung will scold her. Seeing her expression, Lee Seob feels a bit incredulous, since he had never seen her like that before. Taking Min-kyung's hand, Hyun Sung apologizes to Lee Seob for the trouble, saying he will properly introduce himself next time. As they were leaving, Hyun Sung asked Min-kyung to return the coat she borrowed from Lee Seob, but Lee Seob stopped him. He approached and buttoned Min-kyung's coat himself. He told her to return the coat tomorrow. Watching this scene, Hyun Sung seemed thoughtful. Supporting Min-kyung's shoulder, he thanked Lee Seob again. Then he whispered to Min-kyung that he would take her home. Lee Seob watched Hyun Sung with curiosity. At that moment, Min-kyung acted in her drunken state. She said she didn't want to go home, that she came here to have fun. She added that she couldn't remember the floor of her hotel, though she was sure she would remember once she got in the elevator. Hearing Hyun Sung say he would take her to her hotel room, Lee Seob was shocked. His pupils dilated. Lee Seob grabbed Hyun Sung's wrist. He said it seemed strange that he would take her to her hotel room since he wasn't her boyfriend. As her boss, Lee Seob said it was his duty to take her to her room. Supporting Min-kyung, Hyun Sung turned and told Lee Seob he didn't think there was anything going on between him and Min-kyung. Lee Seob was surprised. His pupils dilated. The next morning, Lee Seob woke up with blurry eyes, wondering if everything that had happened the night before was just a dream. After splashing cold water on his face, Lee Seob began to wonder what happened after those two left. Once fully dressed, Lee Seob looked at himself in the mirror and told himself that what happened between the two was none of his business. When he arrived at the parking lot, Min-kyung greeted Lee Seob as usual, in her normal work mode. Lee Seob responded and then commented that it seemed she had slept well, showing no signs of a hangover from the night before. Min-kyung turned to explain, but Lee Seob turned his head, not listening to what Min-kyung was saying. He felt irritated and confused, wondering why Min-kyung kept making him nervous. At noon, Min-kyung knocked on Lee Seob's door to remind him that lunch was ready. Lee Seob turned to look at Min-kyung and told her he had no appetite and didn't want to eat. With his back to Min-kyung again, Lee Seob told her to cancel all his appointments for the day, saying he wasn't feeling well. Leaning against the door, Min-kyung lowered her head in thought. She thought it was difficult to find the right moment to return Lee Seob's coat. Remembering what happened yesterday, she blushed with embarrassment, wondering if she should pretend nothing happened or apologize to Lee Seob. She felt that Lee Seob might not want to see her today. In a bad mood, Lee Seob went out for a drive and simply told his driver, Kim, to drive forward. Sitting in the car, Lee Seob leaned against the window feeling upset. At that moment, Kim said he would take him to the river. He thought the open space there would be refreshing for Lee Seob. Lee Seob asked the driver if he seemed to be in a bad mood. Kim replied that whenever Lee Seob had a lot on his mind, he went out for a drive. Hearing Kim's words, Lee Seob thought to himself that Kim was quick to notice. Then he mentioned Min-kyung, saying that according to her, running around the lake was the best way to clear one's mind. Lee Seob expressed curiosity upon learning that Min-kyung had the habit of running. Kim explained that running up to 10 kilometers a day was one of Min-kyung's hobbies. He couldn't help but praise her time management skills, managing to exercise despite her tight schedule. Listening to Kim, Lee Seob also felt impressed internally, his face involuntarily turning red. Realizing he was thinking of Min-kyung again, Lee Seob harshly scolded Kim for being noisy while driving. That night, Lee Seob sat chatting with his sister Soo-jin and Jun Seob in the living room. His younger sister, Soo-jin, teased him for coming home to eat, despite always saying he was too busy every day. Hearing Soo-jin's teasing, Lee Seob looked at Jun Seob and replied that she implied he was the only one who didn't come home. Then he asked Jun Seob why he was there. Jun Seob replied that he was going to get engaged soon, so he had to see the president. Hearing this news, Soo-jin beside them praised Jun Seob for being so cool. Lee Seob said that Soo-jin was making a big deal out of nothing. Unable to contain her excitement, Soo-jin began to imitate the confession Jun Seob made in the media. She added that guys as romantic as him were rare in this world. Soo-jin teased Lee Seob again, saying how pathetic he was since he only knew work and didn't go on dates. She said Lee Seob must be burning inside. Lee Seob, with a dark expression, asked if Soo-jin was looking for trouble. Laughing, she explained she was just joking. Lee Seob got up saying he wanted to get some fresh air outside. Then he asked Jun Seob to join him outside to talk. Jun Seob smiled slightly at Lee Seob. Taking a bottle of drink, Jun Seob followed Lee Seob to the yard. He spoke first, commenting on the heat, and then drank the whole bottle in one gulp. Seeing Jun Seob finish the drink in one sip, Lee Seob was shocked. After drinking, Jun Seob felt refreshed. But Lee Seob wondered if drinking like that would hurt his throat. Jun Seob said Soo-jin once told him that guys who drink like that look sexy. Curious about what Lee Seob wanted, Jun Seob asked. Lee Seob explained that there was a reason he called him. Looking into the distance, Lee Seob slowly said he wanted Lee Seob to take Min-kyung back to his team. But Jun Seob directly rejected him. Seeing Jun Seob reject him without even asking why, Lee Seob showed an incredulous expression. Jun Seob told him his team was already good, and that Min-kyung was doing a great job. Then he asked Lee Seob to give him a convincing reason. Lee Seob lowered his head, then reluctantly said that Min-kyung was a versatile talent, and it was a pity she was his secretary. But Jun Seob seemed to see through Lee Seob and calmly asked why he was only mentioning this now. Then he asked if there were any other problems regarding Min-kyung. Lee Seob lowered his head silently. The next day, photos of intimate contact between Lee Seob and Min-kyung at a hotel bar were in the news. Soo-jin, excited about the gossip, went to see Lee Seob and teased him in person. Waking up to Soo-jin's questions, Lee Seob was confused. Seeing the photo on his phone, he froze. Soo-jin pressed Lee Seob about the identity of this mysterious woman. Then, Soo-jin began guessing the mysterious woman's identity herself. Suddenly, she asked Lee Seob if the mysterious woman could be Min-kyung. Seeing Soo-jin guess correctly, Lee Seob was surprised and nervous. Soo-jin zoomed in on the photo, commenting that it was the first time she saw Lee Seob hug a woman that way. After all, even the slightest contact with an interviewer made him panic. Soo-jin even fantasized that Lee Seob and Min-kyung would start a wonderful office romance. Lee Seob tried to explain the bar scene, but Soo-jin kept saying he needed to go out with someone. Soo-jin approached, asking him if he ever thought about dating. Lee Seob asked her to calm down. Soo-jin seriously asked Lee Seob if he would really marry a woman he didn't love, for the sake of the TK group harmony and the Choi family. Then she wondered if that was why Lee Seob kept his chastity. Lee Seob blushed and denied it. Then, Lee Seob shyly said he would only date a girl he fell in love with at first sight. Hearing this, Soo-jin burst out laughing. Soo-jin laughed at this and joked that she would respect his thinking. Lee Seob got angry and asked her to give back his expense card. Returning the expense card, she joked that she would always support his romance. After she left, Lee Seob felt shy about what she said about love. At work, Min-kyung apologized to Lee Seob for the news story he was involved in. Lee Seob told Min-kyung that she didn't need to apologize for this, and said he also shouldn't have interfered in his personal life. But Min-kyung said she had failed in her duties as a secretary, and hadn't handled the spread of the scandal quickly. She promised to do her best to protect Lee Seob's name. After saying this, Min-kyung bowed deeply to Lee Seob to show her remorse. Lee Seob told Min-kyung it was no big deal, then immediately changed the subject by asking about her schedule. Min-kyung immediately returned to her professional attitude. In the elevator, Lee Seob thought about Min-kyung's humble attitude. His rational side told him the scandal was just another job for her. At that moment, Lee Seob strangely felt a little disappointed. The moment he left the company building, Lee Seob saw many reporters taking photos of him. Countless camera flashes pointed at Lee Seob, and at that moment, he seemed to have lost his soul and stood frozen in place. Not knowing what painful memories Lee Seob had evoked, his face changed and he looked like he was going to vomit. Seeing that Lee Seob wasn't well, Min-kyung quickly went to help him with concern. Seeing Lee Seob breathing fast, turning pale and trembling, Min-kyung guessed he might be having a panic attack. At that moment, Min-kyung was very worried about Lee Seob, and the camera flashes in front kept firing. Min-kyung didn't know what to do. At that moment, Kim arrived by car just in time. Kim told Min-kyung to hurry and help Lee Seob get in the car. In the car, Min-kyung asked Lee Seob worriedly if he was okay. Lee Seob, still in a panic state, couldn't understand her words. Sweat kept dripping down Lee Seob's face. Min-kyung became more and more anxious and the sweat was mixing with tears. Suddenly, Lee Seob lost consciousness and collapsed onto Min-kyung. The story then flashes back to Lee Seob's childhood. He was always taught, as the heir to the TK group, that countless eyes were watching him. From an early age, Lee Seob's parents took him to attend various social events. From that moment on, Lee Seob began to fear camera flashes a little. He was taught to always maintain a perfect image for the TK group, avoiding any unflattering photographs. Once, during a family photo shoot, Lee Seob, overwhelmed by the bright flashes, fainted. Memory returns to the present. As if dreaming those unpleasant memories, Lee Seob suddenly woke up. Lee Seob sat up and realized he was in a hospital. Realizing he must have lost consciousness earlier, Lee Seob fell down. He thought he was fine with camera flashes now, but this still happened. Suddenly, Lee Seob recalled Min-kyung's blurry voice before he fainted. Looking up, he saw Min-kyung sleeping on the sofa across from him. Lee Seob checked the time and guessed that Min-kyung hadn't gone home, but had stayed here with him all night. Min-kyung shifted slightly while sleeping and suddenly woke up. She hurriedly got up when she saw Lee Seob standing right in front of her. Without her glasses, Min-kyung quickly helped Lee Seob, telling him to rest. After sitting down, Lee Seob suggested that Min-kyung should go home to rest, but she refused. Min-kyung put on her glasses and said she stayed voluntarily because she wasn't responsible for managing his case beforehand. She also mentioned that Lee Seob hadn't been eating regularly, so she wanted to make sure he ate before leaving. When they brought the food, Lee Seob had no appetite, but Min-kyung insisted he should eat. She reassured Lee Seob that news of his fainting would not leak. Lee Seob expressed his gratitude. Suddenly, Min-kyung's stomach growled loudly. Lee Seob laughed, and Min-kyung felt embarrassed. Lee Seob asked her to eat too, or he wouldn't. While eating, Lee Seob and Min-kyung chatted. Lee Seob was surprised to see the usually meticulous Min-kyung with messy hair, looking more like a regular person and not a robot. Min-kyung, upon hearing this, said she would fix it. Then, Lee Seob confessed his past to Min-kyung. He told Min-kyung that he had been taught to be perfect, careful, and to behave well to avoid scandals in the media. He felt like he was always walking on eggshells, careful with his words and actions. He even confessed to Min-kyung that he fainted during a family portrait session. Then, Lee Seob frankly and laughingly told Min-kyung that it's okay to relax sometimes. Min-kyung looked at Lee Seob, astonished. After talking, Lee Seob went back to eating and told Min-kyung not to keep staring. While eating, Min-kyung thought that Lee Seob was facing many more difficulties than she realized. Later, Min-kyung, now dressed neatly, informed Lee Seob about the video conference schedule for the day and told him she would be back before 8 a.m. Lee Seob looked at the time. It was almost 3 a.m. now, and said 8 a.m. was too early to start working. But Min-kyung said the audition had already been postponed yesterday. Rescheduling again wouldn't be good, and she assured Lee Seob that all data was fully prepared. Lee Seob, lying in bed, asked Min-kyung why she wasn't sleeping there. After he asked her to stay and sleep with him, Min-kyung stopped at the door and the atmosphere in the room became awkward. Seeing that, Lee Seob regretted asking Min-kyung to stay. He quickly said goodbye and told her to go home. Once sure she had left, Lee Seob had a mental breakdown over his words. Despite that, he managed to sleep well that night and woke up early and full of energy the next day. Then, Min-kyung arrived at his room, looking as professional as usual. She got to work immediately after greeting Lee Seob with a good morning. Lee Seob watched her work, thinking how exhausted she must be despite working so energetically. Suddenly, Soo-jin appeared and asked Lee Seob if he was going to play all day. Lee Seob demanded to know why Soo-jin had appeared in his hospital room. He was surprised to hear that it was his mother who sent her to bring him medicinal herbs that he hated. Soo-jin greeted Min-kyung and told her she had known her since winning first place in the company sports competition. Then, Soo-jin took Lee Seob aside to say she would help him despite Lee Seob's protests. Before Lee Seob could do anything, Sujin ran over to Minkyung and invited her to have coffee together. After having coffee, Sujin shared that she had seen Lee Seob faint many times but never seen him so relaxed. She told Minkyung that her father had always demanded Lee Seob be perfect since childhood. He always tried his best to be recognized by his grandfather. However, Jun Seob joined the family when Lee Seob was 20 and, by mistake, managed to acquire more than half of the company, making Lee Seob feel kicked out of the TK Group heir position. Upon hearing this, Minkyung regretted thinking Lee Seob was just a rich and worthless kid. Seeing that Minkyung felt bad for Lee Seob, Sujin quickly asked her to keep helping Lee Seob so he wouldn't be too stressed at work. But before Minkyung could say anything, Sujin pretended to cry while telling Minkyung she cared a lot about her brother. Minkyung, sadly, gave in to the little one's pleas and ended up promising Sujin that she would come up with a plan to help Lee Seob relieve stress. In the end, Minkyung's plan was a group vacation to Gangwon province. Despite Lee Seob's skepticism, Minkyung explained that some quality free time would improve his work performance. Lee Seob didn't believe her at all and kept ignoring Minkyung even when she tried to talk to him. In the end, they ended up sitting silently, each lost in their own thoughts. Minkyung cast a furtive glance at Lee Seob and realized that despite his attitude, he was actually excited about the trip. She was determined to make this vacation fun to make up for all the stress she had caused Lee Seob. Minkyung even recruited an amazing helper, Manager Kim. This man had extensive experience organizing recreational activities since elementary school. He was a total expert at making vacations fun and stress-free. Due to his reputation as an amazing vacation planner, he was named the night commander who would lead their trip. On the way to their destination, Manager Kim enthusiastically updated Lee Seob on their lodging. He assured Lee Seob that he had chosen a beautiful place with many good reviews. When they arrived, Manager Kim was amazed to see that the place looked exactly like the photos on the booking site. It was a large and spacious place, furnished like a cozy home. Manager Kim took responsibility to show them everything, specifically pointing out which rooms would be for women and which would be for men respectively. However, Lee Seob froze upon hearing this news. Both he and Sujin were surprised to find out that there were only 2 rooms, and they had to share with another person. Manager Kim didn't understand why they were surprised and just urged them to move into the rooms and unpack. Lee Seob did what he was told, but he couldn't feel comfortable with Manager Kim in the room, as he had never shared his room with anyone else. He was worried he wouldn't be able to sleep knowing there was another person in the room. On the other hand, Minkyung and Sujin also unpacked their luggage. Sujin was surprised by how few things Minkyung had brought, but she told her she only packed what was necessary since it was a casual outing. Sujin disagreed and said they should create a festive atmosphere since they were on vacation. After a while, Lee Seob and Manager Kim waited downstairs for the 2 women, as they had gotten ready earlier. Hearing Manager Kim calling them, the women hurried and came out of their room. Something immediately caught Lee Seob's attention. The 2 women came down the stairs wearing cute outfits and nice makeup suitable for the day they would have. Minkyung wore a pink dress that fit her perfectly and showed off her amazing figure. Lee Seob couldn't help blushing when he saw Minkyung, but he quickly turned his attention to his sister and asked why they were all dressed like that. Sujin said she wanted to create a festive atmosphere, then asked Lee Seob if he thought Minkyung had amazing legs. Fortunately, neither Minkyung nor Manager Kim heard what they were saying. Upon leaving the house, Sujin suggested they split up into pairs to be more efficient with their time. Before anyone could say anything, Sujin told Lee Seob and Minkyung to enjoy the beautiful and interesting nearby places, while she and Manager Kim bought supplies. Sujin and Manager Kim quickly left before Lee Seob and Minkyung could protest. Lee Seob and Minkyung stayed silent watching the car drive away. Then, Minkyung said they should actually look for the places Sujin mentioned. They ended up in a nearby forest. Minkyung asked Lee Seob if he liked the scenery while walking along a trail in the forest. When Lee Seob said he wasn't sure, since he had never walked through a forest before, Minkyung shared that there was a similar mountain to the one they were on in her childhood home. This forest reminded her of childhood memories, when she picked flowers, caught insects, and played in the river with her friends. Lee Seob hesitantly said those sounded like good memories. Suddenly, Minkyung stopped him when they came across some red berries. There was a mountain strawberry bush full of ripe berries. Minkyung picked one and ate it, surprising Lee Seob since he didn't know the fruit was edible. Min-kyung told him they were not only delicious but also sweet, and offered him to try one. She patiently offered it to Lee Seob while he looked at the fruit. Eventually, he opened his mouth and let Min-kyung give it to him by hand. Lee Seob chewed slowly, not daring to look at Min-kyung and reminding himself how close they were. Eventually, he couldn't stand the taste and complained that it was bitter and sour. Min-kyung apologized half-seriously, saying she must have given him one that wasn't ripe. The forest path led them to a picturesque spot next to a shallow stream. They also found a field full of pink flowers matching the color of Min-kyung's dress. It was in that field where Min-kyung made a ring of some wildflowers and gave it to Lee Seob. Lee Seob stared at the wildflower ring for a long time with an expression Min-kyung had never seen before. It was an expression that brought relief to Min-kyung, as it was a look of relaxation and enjoyment. They spent a long time in the field while Lee Seob watched Min-kyung busy picking flowers. Finally, they stopped at a section of the stream that was under the shade of some trees. They sat next to each other while Min-kyung told Lee Seob that he should follow his own advice to always remember to release stress in order to enjoy life. She told him that his advice was the exact reason why she came on the trip with him. Lee Seob told her that he only came on the trip because he had never experienced anything like that before. Suddenly it started to rain. The rain quickly intensified, surprising Lee Seob and Min-kyung outside of the peaceful moment they were enjoying. The slope of the path became very slippery with the rain, and Lee Seob reminded Min-kyung to be careful while they climbed. Lee Seob worried as he noticed that Min-kyung's dress made it difficult for her to ascend the slippery slope. His hand trembled, wishing to reach out to help her. At that moment, Min-kyung slipped. Lee Seob quickly reached out and caught her. Min-kyung was very surprised by the help, and quickly thanked him with a smile. Lee Seob held Min-kyung's hand tightly even while mentally grumbling about the strange weather. He didn't let go of her hand even when they stopped walking on the slippery path. He even shared his shirt so she could use it as a temporary umbrella. When they found a bus stop, they entered quickly and took shelter there. Both were soaked to the bone and Lee Seob noticed that Min-kyung was trembling from the cold. He wrung the water out of his shirt and tried to dry it as best as possible. Then, he put it on Min-kyung to keep her warm. Min-kyung couldn't help but look at him and noticed how his shirt was becoming transparent. She realized that Lee Seob was also trembling and asked if he was okay. Lee Seob told her he was fine and that he was warm from all the running they had just done. Min-kyung was still worried, since Lee Seob's face was very red, so she placed her hand on his forehead to check if he had a fever. Lee Seob pulled away from the touch and clenched his fist, feeling uncomfortable from Min-kyung's touch. Fortunately, at that moment Manager Kim and Soo-jin arrived. Lee Seob and Min-kyung sat together in the back, since there was a box of groceries at one end of the seat. On the way back, Min-kyung chatted with Manager Kim and Soo-jin, while Lee Seob looked out the window, not wanting to look at Min-kyung. Back at the house, the four worked together to make dinner. Manager Kim even made a barbecue. It was a happy atmosphere and everyone enjoyed it, except Lee Seob. Later that night, Lee Seob went out to get some fresh air. He looked at the broken flower ring in his hand, lost in thought. Suddenly, Min-kyung appeared and Lee Seob quickly put the broken ring in his pocket. They sat down to chat and Min-kyung told Lee Seob that all the fun they had during the day reminded her that she had been focusing too much on her work. Lee Seob agreed, saying that his life had always been about his future in the TK group. Lee Seob told her he felt like he was holding her back with his own problems. But Min-kyung responded that she had chosen her career path on her own and that any difficulties she had to overcome were not Lee Seob's fault. Seeing that Lee Seob was upset, Min-kyung even told him she felt very honored to be able to support him as he worked toward the highest position in the company. Her honest and passionate words moved Lee Seob and left him speechless. At that moment, Min-kyung's phone rang with a call that broke the sweet atmosphere. Lee Seob watched as Min-kyung answered the phone, but he got jealous when he realized it was Hyun-seong. So, he left to give her some privacy. Lee Seob became a completely different person after the vacation. He became a responsible boss who could effortlessly lead meetings. His attitude changed from a rich, unserious kid to a company leader who knew he was in charge. But from Min-kyung's point of view, Lee Seob became cold and impersonal. There was not even a trace left of the carefree and relaxed Lee Seob she had seen during the vacation. Min-kyung reasoned with herself that this was the real Lee Seob from the start. Lee Seob dived fully into his work, even working hard when taken to another meeting. He also paid attention when Min-kyung talked about her schedule. However, He couldn't stop thinking about Minkyung's relationship with Hyunseong. Their good relationship bothered him. Another thing that annoyed him was how hard Minkyung worked. He decided to give her even more work just to see how long it would take before she admitted she needed a break. He also kept criticizing her nonstop and asked her to redo the same work. But Minkyung kept working with a smile on her face. Her lack of reaction irritated Lee Seob endlessly. When Minkyung brought him dinner that night, Lee Seob pretended he didn't like it. He told Minkyung she was wrong and that it wasn't his favorite food. Persistent, Minkyung brought out another dish that was also one of Lee Seob's favorites. Lee Seob was upset that his plan didn't work, so he ate his soup unhappily despite it being delicious. Later that night, when Lee Seob was leaving the office, he saw Minkyung eating something. Lee Seob was surprised to find that Minkyung was actually eating the food she pretended not to like. Minkyung reminded him that he was the one who said she had to eat the food as punishment for ordering it wrong. This made Lee Seob put his hand on his face and asked if she did it on purpose to annoy him. Minkyung explained she only ate it because she was too busy to go get something else. Angry, Lee Seob drank all the juice before Minkyung could protest. Lee Seob then authoritatively said the drink was his in the first place and told Minkyung to keep working. He also threateningly told her she needed to work harder. This made Minkyung clench her fist tightly in frustration. After that, Lee Seob left without saying another word. In a hidden corner, Lee Seob laughed at Minkyung's reaction. He thought her angry face was funny. The next morning, already during work hours, Minkyung and Lee Seob entered the meeting room. When they entered, Minkyung asked if they had been waiting long. A very handsome man stood up from his seat and greeted the CEO, introducing himself as Min Ji-hoo, the lawyer who will be in charge of legal advice for the merger and acquisition of Baekhyang Resort. At that moment, Hyunseong's voice was heard, telling the director that he could finally greet him formally, introducing himself as MIP's lawyer. Lee Seob replied that he was glad to see him again, shaking hands with both young men, while in his mind he kept thinking, "This bastard is going to start working at TK from today." The merger and acquisition of the resort that TK had cited had started, and for that, a temporary team of experts was created. However, for Lee Seob, the situation was too uncomfortable. Why did the lawyer sent to TK have to be him? Of all the law firms, why did he have to work there? Does this even make sense? Lee Seob felt very offended. Meanwhile, Minkyung was not doing so well. She was already feeling very exhausted after a short dream vacation. She was followed by an avalanche of work and the hectic pace of being a secretary now supporting the temporary team of experts. She was so into her work that she didn't even notice the passage of time. And also, for some reason, Lee Seob had become a jerk to her. He's so childish. Does he think she can handle him? He truly doesn't know Minkyung. Meanwhile, Lee Seob was at his desk remembering Minkyung, thinking about the dark circles and tired look she had. He felt some regret, and wondered if he had gone too far. But no, his pride won again and he told himself that he is the boss, he's supposed to give her work. Suddenly he got up from his seat to go to Minkyung's office and when he peeked in, he saw she wasn't there. He started checking her desk, saw it was so messy and saw some leftover food, realizing she hadn't even eaten properly. "How stubborn you are, if it's hard for you just say it's hard," he thought. Lee Seob started looking for her all over the building and, when he got to a specific area, everyone was surprised and asked what brought him there. Lee Seob just said he was passing through. The men, very excited, told him that the morale of their team members was very high because he was always very attentive. During all this time, they had received words of motivation through Minkyung. They began praising her, saying she is too efficient and there is nothing she can't do, and that she must be busy with her personal work. However, they wondered how she could do things so fast. Lee Seob simply laughed, and told them she is very good at doing work. Then he asked if they knew where Miss Minkyung was. The workers told him she was with the team of experts and, automatically, Lee Seob turned to head to that place. As he walked, he wondered why she went with the team of experts again. Meanwhile, Minkyung was with the team of experts for the merger and acquisition of Baekhyang Resort. Minkyung was working very comfortably with both lawyers and, there, hidden behind the door, Lee Seob was watching them very angrily while wondering, "Is it necessary for you to work so close to them?" So jealousy got the better of him, and he decided to open the door. When they saw Lee Seob, everyone was very surprised to see him there. Lee Seob sarcastically told Minkyung she seemed very busy. Min-kyung responded that she was just finishing handing in the reports. The lawyer Min Jae-hoo came to her defense and told the director that, thank God, Min-kyung had helped them with the task. He continued explaining that he asked the secretary for a report, and she wrote it perfectly. Min-kyung was a great help. Even their accountants were surprised by the report. Lee Seob looked very pleased, knowing his secretary was useful to them. However, he quickly changed his expression and told Miss Min-kyung that she is not a person with time to waste. He coldly asked if the agenda of construction orders in Saudi Arabia was in order, and how the expansion of the power plant there was going. Min-kyung replied that the data has already been gathered in a report, and that the relevant departments are compiling the status of the expansion. She said she would have everything ready by this afternoon. Lee Seob retorted, he can't wait any longer, he insists on the priority of finishing it immediately. Min-kyung told him she would take care of it. Suddenly, Lee Seob approached Hyun-seong and asked if he was someone close to the secretary of the CEO of TK. Hyun-seong replied that if his lack of attention had caused inconvenience in the CEO's work, he apologized. After that they left the room, but not without first thanking them for their hard work. He told them to continue working the same way, but not to get close to his secretary, staring at them. Hyun-seong kept staring at them. In the past, Min-kyung, Sia and Hyun-seong started being friends since they were kids. They always used to walk to the forest to play with the flowers, always ending up eating forest berries. Min-kyung enjoyed those moments. It was something that made her very happy. When she grew up, she asked Hyun-seong if he was going to the army and he replied yes, next month. She felt a little sad because she didn't know how she would go to college without him. But Hyun-seong, with a smile, told her not to worry about that, because he would be back soon. She, smiling at him, told him it was okay. She would wait for him until he returned. While the sun lit up the offices of the TK building, Min-kyung was checking the time. She was too sad because she had missed lunchtime again. Maybe it was because her vocational workshop was very effective, but Lee Seob suddenly started working like crazy. Because of that, she had been so busy she didn't notice how the day went by. However, she thought it was much better than sitting around doing nothing. While looking at a store, she thought it would be better to control her hunger. But upon a closer look, the shelf had already been emptied. That made her very sad because she had to eat something to keep working. She wondered what she could eat to regain her energy. Suddenly, she crouched down after finding some snacks and got excited that they were sold at that store. At that moment she saw something and turned around. Lee Seob was next to her asking why she was sitting there. Immediately after, he took the product from her hand and told her to give it to him. Then he went to the cashier to pay for it, leaving Min-kyung confused by what had just happened. Minutes later, Lee Seob asked if she wanted to sit somewhere since the weather was perfect, and Min-kyung replied yes. Then they went to sit on a park bench. After a few seconds of silence, Lee Seob decided to drink his beverage. He opened the bottle and started drinking it. Min-kyung began watching him as he did. When Lee Seob realized she was staring at him, he got shy and started wondering why she was looking at him like that. Remembering Jun Seob's words, women like it when a man drinks this way, because it makes us look more attractive. Upon remembering that, he blushed even more and let out a small smile. He was very excited because maybe he had seduced her a little, and hiding his blush, he told Min-kyung, I saw someone drink it like this and thought it was disgusting, but after drinking it this way I must tell you it really quenches your thirst. As he turned to Min-kyung, she seemed to have no idea what was happening, but decided to open her snacks and told him, maybe you have a stomach problem. Lee Seob realized it was Jun Seob's mean prank. Suddenly, as Lee Seob saw what Min-kyung was eating, he asked, Isn't that what you used to like eating when you were at the training center? That question surprised Min-kyung a lot, and she asked if he remembered that. Then she shared a bit of her chocolate. Lee Seob, realizing he had been caught remembering things about Min-kyung, felt very embarrassed. He reminded her that during TK Group's employee training, Min-kyung shared a bar with him, telling him she really liked them. Also, the quality-price ratio is excellent and the price per 100 grams is very cheap, considering the amount and taste of the nuts it contains. That really surprised Lee Seob, who watched her eat the chocolate bar and noticed how sexy she looked. Compared to the present, she still looked just as sexy. He, sighing, thought, today, just like that day, the chocolate is very, very sweet, the sticky caramel clings to the teeth in your mouth, and just like back then, the only one watching the other is me. Later, when Minkyung was leaving work. She heard someone call her, only to see it was Hyun-seong. Minkyung asked if he had finished work late, to which he replied that this time she was the one leaving early. Minkyung, very excited, answered yes, because she had almost finished all her tasks. Hyun-seong offered to carry her bag, only to realize how heavy it was. But Minkyung explained it was heavy because her laptop was inside. Hyun-seong suggested they have dinner together because he knew some good restaurants nearby. Then he told her he had wanted to invite her to dinner after her first day of work, but she was always busy. She, hiding her embarrassment, told him yes, that it was her fault. So they both went to a restaurant to enjoy a delicious dinner. Minkyung was extremely happy because the food was really good. Hyun-seong kindly told her to take her time and enjoy it. She told him she felt like she was in heaven and Hyun-seong offered her some water. Then he told her not to skip meals just because she was busy, that she must be really tired. So they decided to enjoy the delicious dinner, having a lovely time full of laughter and stories. After dinner, they were both in the car. Minkyung was complaining that tomorrow she'd have to work again and didn't want to go home. Hyun-seong asked why, and she replied that if she goes home, she'll take a shower, then go to sleep, and by the time she wakes up, it'll be morning again and she'll have to go to work. Hyun-seong could only laugh awkwardly and agree that it was true. Also, she seemed like a total workaholic. However, she still had a very active social life. With a smile, he said Minkyung was really good at her job and that the head of the expert team was very thankful to her. She apologized for that one time. She didn't expect the CEO to get so mad. She figured he was like that, but didn't imagine he'd behave that way toward him. Hyun-seong, very embarrassed, told her not to worry because it was his fault. But Minkyung replied no, that she thought there was something more. She wondered what kind of relationship she had with Hyun-seong. She told him that Hyun-seong and she were childhood friends. But immediately after saying that, Lee Seob got very angry. Minkyung assumed he misunderstood the situation and thought Hyun-seong helped her because of their friendship. She understood his point of view, but didn't know if it was worth getting that mad over something like that. Did something happen at the hotel that day? Hyun-seong started to remember when Lee Seob didn't let him take Minkyung to her room. But even so, he didn't listen, which made Lee Seob very angry. When Hyun-seong left Minkyung in the room, she was so drunk she couldn't even walk, so he helped her. When Minkyung entered, she was excited because the room was beautiful. Hyun-seong was analyzing the whole place, but was interrupted by Minkyung, who asked him to please unbutton her coat because she couldn't do it. Hyun-seong immediately blushed. He was mad because she was completely drunk. Approaching her, he helped unbutton her coat, and in doing so, saw her beautiful cleavage, which made him blush. Very angry, he scolded her for drinking so much, knowing she has low tolerance, and even more so knowing how dangerous it is to look like that in front of men. But Minkyung ignored him and went to take a bath, leaving him with the words in his mouth. That made Hyun-seong sit on the edge of the bed, furious because this was truly dangerous. And well guys, this is the end of today's video. I hope you liked it, and that you give it a like and share it. Remember that if you want the continuation, you just have to comment, next part. With that said, see you in the next video.